guys, it's Economics here. Welcome back to another revision session on the A592 GCSE economics papers. So this is for my year 11. This is a little bit of feedback from Monday, so you can be ready to, during the lesson, you can be ready to go over and correct the papers, which I will be giving you back. So we're looking at the May 2012 A592 paper. A592, of course, is how the economy works. It is supposed to be the macroeconomic paper, but as some of you quite rightly pointed out at the end of the lesson on Thursday, it does look like a lot of this material is more along the microeconomic route rather than the macro. And I would certainly concur with what you say there. However, you must be mentally agile enough to cope with this in the exam. Should this happen in June 2016, I imagine it probably won't. This is quite an early paper, probably back in the early days, and I guess this type of thing wouldn't happen again, but who knows, you've got to be ready for it. So let's get to grips with the questions on this particular paper, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm just going to zoom in on this board, which as the saying goes, you know, this is one I have prepared earlier, and I hope you can see that okay. So question 1A simply asked you to indicate which two taxes are put on petrol by the UK government. Now, of course, national insurance is not put on petrol, nor is road tax, so you should have ticked excise duties and VAT, value added tax. Very easy question for 2 marks. Question B, part 1. Explain what is meant by a negative externality, again for 2 marks. In this particular question, the things which you should have had in your answer are, you should have included the words third party cost as a negative externality, and you should have explained it's whenever a production or consumption decision negatively affects a third party. And those of you who paid attention to what we talked about last week in terms of giving an example when you didn't really know the definition properly, that has earned you the 2 marks. So well done. That is exactly what you want to do. That's what we want to see as we move forward. Question B, part 2. Identify 2 negative externalities which are caused by car travel. Can I just say, ladies and gentlemen, please avoid the use of one-word answers. Try not to just write pollution or noise. Just fill it out, flesh it out, just to be on the extra safe side. Just flesh it out that little bit. But again, that was very well answered, and yeah, you know, you all just talked about pollution, noise, accidents, all of those aspects. So let's not get bogged down in that one, B part 2. Let's move on to C. Other than a tax on petrol, state and explain 2 policies which can be used to reduce car travel. This is where you really do need to be agile, mentally agile enough to realise really we are looking more at the microeconomic policies here rather than the macro. So those of you who focused on, say for example, a monetary policy to do with the base rate of interest, probably too far removed from the actual market failure here, the problem in the market. And again, even fiscal policy, amending income tax rates, again, you could argue that one and you could argue it through quite well, but again, it's a bit far removed from the actual market failure in this case. So things that you want to be considering for this would be, you are trying to identify policies which will adjust individuals and households' behaviours. So think about things like, for example, a subsidy. And who would you give the subsidy to? Well, you might give the subsidy to public transport, and let's build better infrastructure, let's have a better bus service, let's have a better rail service, let's have a more integrated public transport system so that when you get off your bus you're actually at your destination rather than you get off your bus and you've still got 3 miles to go to get to your actual destination. So that type of thing. You could also, sorry I forgot, subsidies for example placed on electric vehicles. Just down the road, of course, we have the most efficient car plant in the whole of Europe, Nissan. And they produce, of course, the Nissan Leaf. How much is a Nissan Leaf? £25,000. But to you, the government will give you a subsidy, a government grant of £5,000, making it an absolute bargain of £20,000. So subsidies for new electric vehicles could be something you may wish to consider. What about things like congestion charging, as they do in London, as they do in Durham, that type of thing, which obviously encourages people to amend their behaviours, encourages them to use park and ride schemes, for example. Park and ride even could be another example of a policy. Or what about people who enjoy getting on their bicycle, like myself, introducing cycle to work schemes. Anything like that. And again, I know it's micro more than macro, but yeah, that's the way this question's going, and those are the types of answers required for it. So let's move on now to the big E, the 20 marker, the part D question. Okay. So part D asked you the following. Discuss whether high taxation on petrol is the most effective policy to reduce car travel. Taxation. So, again, I've written here, microanalysis is more appropriate. Some of you have sort of attempted diagrams, but they're a bit of a mishmash of micro and macro, which is just not appropriate. Don't do that. You've got to really stick to this is micro diagram, this is a macro diagram. So you can see I've got two diagrams here. The one on the left here, this is for the introduction of a specific tax, shifting the supply curve upwards. The one on the right is for the introduction of a subsidy, which lowers cost of production and of course shifts the supply curve to the right and shifts it downwards. So when you're talking, a lot of you did this quite well, introducing the whole notion of a tax, saying that the supply curve shifts upwards because firms' costs of production will rise. Consequently, the price rises also. And you can see on this diagram, we've got the direction of travel. So quantity demanded and supplied going in this direction, price going upwards. And so we can clearly, in our analysis, we can say that the introduction of a tax in this way will reduce quantity demanded, and that is, of course, as a result of the price rationing the good and service and amending individuals' behaviours. Some of you then went on to evaluate, which was nice, because you drew a very inelastic, a very steep, remember, inelastic elasticity, measuring the responsiveness of demand to a change in price. Those of you who haven't seen my videos on elasticity and all that jazz, have a look and you'll find it. But you can see here that the price elasticity of demand is very inelastic. And it shows therefore that even a very significant rise in the price, in this case of petrol, only actually brings forth quite small changes in behaviours, because of course people, they need their car. They rely on it so much. Some of you talked about the fact that it's a necessity, particularly for people living in rural areas. It's a nice word, isn't it? Rural. Particularly those people living in rural areas where they don't have the public transport networks that perhaps people living in more urban areas benefit from. So nice analysis and also nice bit of evaluation to go alongside it. So some of you said, well, what's a possible alternative? A possible alternative is a subsidy. And you have drawn this diagram, which is tip-top, ladies and gentlemen. And again, draw the direction of travel. Price falls, so quantity demanded and supplied rises. Again, amending individuals' and households' behaviours. And so you're pointing out the fact that if the price of public transport falls, people are potentially, possibly more likely to use it. But again, you've done the right thing. You've drawn it, you've analysed it, and then you've said, but actually it depends upon a number of factors, such as the quality of provision. We all know that public transport in certain areas leaves a lot to be desired. We're quite lucky here in the northeast of England having the metro system, a very good system, integrated with the bus system and the train network. It's quite an integrated service, but that is not the case everywhere. And the coverage of it, public transport does not necessarily cover those outlying areas, as you well know. And so, again, great evaluative comment. And also consider other things. Consider things like bus lanes, the introduction of bus lanes. Anything else which you consider to be relevant. The Boris Bike scheme, in order to amend behaviour, the cycle to work scheme, all of these types of things. One thing I would say is, a lot of you are structuring these relatively well. So you're doing, here's the analysis. So this is the on the one hand part. Then you're saying, however, the flip side, on the other hand, here's the reasons why it might not work. But what you're not doing at the end is coming to a reasoned conclusion. So in the future, and on Monday, on Thursday, when I give you the next question that you're going to do, think carefully, how am I going to conclude this? And when you conclude, don't be a fence sitter. Come down on one side of the fence or the other. Because, ladies and gentlemen, if you sit on the fence, you get splinters. Bye for now.